Lowkey Giant.
Jose Caballer is a designer and tech enthusiast with over 26 years of experience working closely with titans of tech. As a community architect and celestial pirate, Jose has helped to facilitate and support some of the most pioneering companies in the world, like Razorfish and Consensys. His vision of the future is one focused on community, authenticity, and the realization that even his grandmother had her own version of the blockchain.
Bushwick was where I got my kind of like my baptism of understanding the experience of Dominican and Puerto Rican people in the United States outside of my own, because my experience of being other, of being an immigrant, of being from the Caribbean was very limited to the fact that I grew up in California and, I didn't see myself in the technology industry as other, but I felt that way, but I couldn't tell why, because I had never really recognized myself until I grew my hair and I said, oh my God, I have really curly hair. And I grew this big afro and I'm like, oh wait, I'm not white. But I've been hiding it my whole life, right? So then Bushwick was really my awakening, if you were to say, to the artist as a person of color, having an immigrant experience, my culture matters. When I get so much love from West Africa and from the Caribbean, and I didn't know it, I just didn't recognize it. I was like, why do these people love me so much? And I'm like, motherfucker, because they see you. They see you and they see them. They see themselves in you. They're like, oh, wait, if this guy named Jose Caballer, who has curly hair like me, can actually be there and do that and belong to that, then I can. So that was really a kind of deep realization that I got, not in Brooklyn. I actually now got it here in LA by doing the same thing, by kind of being part of different communities and saying, does this work for me? Does this fit? Am I part of this community? And it was when I went to Venice when I got back from New York, hanging out with my hippie father. Then I came back to my urban roots. I said, I need to get a loft again. And so I came and got a loft downtown. And then suddenly I'm hanging out amongst, people of color. And I'm talking about art and I'm talking about, crypto. And I'm looking at them and I can sense in myself that I was kind of surprised that, that a person of color is pursuing art and, technology on their own terms, in their own music and their own ideas. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, wait a minute. Why do I feel that, wait, you shouldn't be doing that? Or that it's or I feel uncomfortable about it. And I just started digging deeper into it. I'm like, I'm uncomfortable about myself expressing outside of service and outside of being in the system. So I had to get comfortable with it. And that's the journey. Every time you kind of jump from one portal or one port, in my case as a pirate, to the other, you begin noticing the contrast between who you think you are and who you really connect with. And you say, oh, I'm in an experience that feels good, not because it's magic, but because this is where I'm supposed to be. But so let's talk about what NFTs are, a non-fungible token. So ultimately, art has always been validated by the system. And the system that validates art is going to be the galleries, the collectors, the critics, the museums, the society, dinner parties. Oh my God, did you hear about Basquiat? But the point about that is that if the system gives you entree and you get lucky, you might become someone who can make a living from your art. That's the way it's worked, right? What I noticed when I went to art school, I went to Art Center College of Design. I studied fine art. I studied graphic design. It's a degree in fine art. And I'm like, why is there no Latino people? Why is there no Black people here? There were a few. We started a group called Contraste or Contrast for the Latino people, and then it merged with the Black Student Union years later. But it was primarily because you needed to be able to be affluent enough to not be in survival mode to buy $1,000 worth of art supplies per month, right? Or, to go to a school that didn't have a guarantee to you surviving when you graduated. What art and culture in the formal education sense was purview of the wealthy. Let's just say it. It's not for us, right? That's we even did a program called Art is More Than a Hobby for Latino families. And afterwards I felt like an asshole because some of the kids actually ended up that came through that program to the school, but they couldn't stay because they couldn't afford the long term of it. So the reason why I'm mentioning that is because now here we are with an ecosystem that it is both less dependent on the validation of schools, museums, critics. You got an Instagram account, your art's kind of cool, it's resonating with people. You got 100,000 followers. You're doing music, you're doing like graphic tees, you're doing a painting, you're doing prints. I don't even care if it's mediocre, great, amazing. It doesn't matter. If people are buying it and you got a brand, that's it. So the validation now, the message is not about who validates and approves that this is a message worth spreading. You can do it yourself. And your message can now be much more diverse. So you're seeing it. You see it on Instagram all the time. I call it a panopticon of, creative transformation. And a panopticon, if you're familiar with prison, is in the center of the prison. It's circular. You have monitors that look at all the different cells and the different places. We live in our own panopticon. We're just holding it up. We're like broadcasting to all the other prisoners. Check out my shit. Influencer is a weird word. Basically, someone's interested in what you're doing because you're doing something that you're interested in for yourself, right? This is ultimately what mastery is all about. You're not doing it for the money. You're not doing it for approval of the system. You're doing it for, I want to express who I am to the world. And then in that true expression, fueled by the ability to broadcast yourself from anywhere at any time, regardless of ethnicity, gender, color, sexual orientation, anything. And then find people that resonate with you, whether it's 100, 500, 1,000, 2,000, because you don't need 100,000 to make a living from it, right? You just need enough people that say, I love what you're doing. I'm going to give you money in your Patreon, or I'm going to buy your product, or I'm going to say this. NFTs add one more thing, and there's more. It's like an infomercial. They basically allow you to create the validation or the certification, like, how this is a certified painting from, whoever, Picasso, Basquiat, et cetera, that you get from the gallery. The market maker provides the validation. And market makers in the art world are usually galleries, museums, etc. Now the market maker is decentralized. It's anyone. Like, you can mint your own NFT. Keep in mind, you have to have the ability to create the social currency and the cultural backing for whatever you're doing. People think, well, NFTs are available. I'm just gonna, mint or create one, which is basically saying this piece of artwork is authentic, and it has not only the certification of that it is yours and that it's authentic in the smart contract. It also has the exchange of value and the mechanisms for people to bid for it, right? Like if you have it, so it's Christie's, all the validation, all of the pomp and circumstance out of the way, it's given directly to people. So you no longer need intermediated, experiences inside art. Now you can do a lot of that yourself. So basically, everybody knows Bitcoin. It's like the gold, the digital gold. The problem that Bitcoin was trying to solve was the ability to have a digital currency. And the problem the digital currency posed was the double spend problem, meaning if I give you a digital asset, like let's say a song, I can copy it and it goes onto your hard drive and my hard drive. That's great. Now that devalued the hell out of music because now everybody can copy it. We couldn't create digital currency because digital gives you a perfect replication of whatever it is. So the blockchain was created to solve that problem, the double spend problem. And the way it solved it, the Byzantine general's problem is that if you have 4 armies around one castle, and you don't have information about who's going to attack first, who attacks first, right? It's like an information thing. So the way that validation in the blockchain happens is that you spread the same, they're called hash. You basically have the information stored in multiple computers in a network system, right? And they all have to be in consensus that's the amount that you have. So if I give you one Bitcoin, and I had only one Bitcoin, now it says 0, and that number and that information gets spread in the entire block. It's my grandmother's like system of knowing what's happening in the neighborhood. All the viejas in the neighborhood, they were in agreement. Yeah, we saw your grandson, that girl, and she's a hoe. And that information got to my grandma way before I got home. My grandma was using the blockchain to validate data. She knew I knew, and when she looked at me and I'm like, oh, she knows, oh my God, that's the blockchain. Well, you know what? I can feel a little bit kind of like how I felt when I was at Razorfish in the 90s, and like I got to witness the birth of an industry. And I've always worked for titans of technology. I've always been their Aaron or their Joseph, it's my actual name, to their crazy visions, right? Like, okay, I'll interpret it. We'll do the design for it. We'll figure it out. But when he said, he wanted me to come head his company, product development for his company, and I'm like, I don't want to work for Jeff Dodges. I want to be Jeff Dodges. And he looked at me like, okay, got it. Okay, that was the son saying to the father, I want to go be my own man, because I had this drive, this vision. Something was driving me to build something, and it was really about helping creative people understand business, and to be powerful. America, the beacon of hope in the world, right? And look at what we're going through. We're still reconciling the past. We're still reconciling the legacy of colonialism. But what I realized recently is like, oh, wait a minute. It's through the artists. What has become the most, I saw it in Brooklyn in the murals for the first time. I'm walking around Bushwick, just like getting and receiving all this messages. And I'm like, these are the voices of the unheard. Like, you start reading all the murals together. And I'm not talking about the nice sponsored painted ones, brought to you by Intel or brought to you by, a fancy beer. I'm talking about like just the mix, the street ones that are in there really legit. They're all talking to each other. And I'm like, these are the voices of the unheard. Our voices collectively through the digital ecosystem have begun to weave, because now we're seeing each other and we're saying, oh, we do have the right to become, and it's not to become powerful in the old way. It's to become influential in a new way that allows for others to come through and say, oh, I too can. So my point is that our role as elders in our tribes is to lift others. And in us lifting others by example, we begin to unite and create new cultures, because then suddenly somebody who's empowered, who's brown, who's Black, who's Asian, who's queer, who's other, and says, oh my God, I can also have a voice. And they do, and we do. And you look at the generational, millennials, Gen Z, et cetera, and you look at the power that they have, that we have collectively as voices because of technology, and you say, damn. Now, add the ability to transact to that collectiveness. Add the ability to like pay each other in crypto. Add the ability to sell your artwork, as an NFT. So it's really an ecosystem that was waiting for, or has been waiting for, that component to allow people to be truly free. And when, as a creator or as a thinker, you have both the means of making agreements, like an Ethereum contract. The platforms that mint NFTs basically create the agreement and the variables for you of what you want to do with the rights, et cetera. And now what my role, or what I became, from being at Consensys and from my career of helping creative people understand business, I'm like, oh my God, I'm basically like bringing together, synthesizing all of who I am, empowering you know, my grandpa energy or my grandma energy, because this is my grandma's energy from the Dominican Republic, of like, hey, we can do it, we can play. You know how grandparents, when the kids are playing, they go up to them, you're gonna be amazing. They're like, the grandparents, they know what they're doing, man. Grandparents are wizards. They know what they're doing. They're basically giving you the encouraging voices that you're gonna have to hear when the shit gets hard.
Lowkey time. Caballer.
Because it's hard, man, to be an artist, to be fully self-expressed, to be a human in this system, in this world. More so, to be a person of color, or to be other in a world that is still at its surface, the creation of the colonial minds. Because if you think about everything, man, you're getting colonized. Your minds are getting colonized by advertising. Religion colonized your heart and your soul. Culture is ultimately the programming language. We create our own culture. Now we can make money at all levels. You don't have to go into the record label. You don't have to go into the gallery system and the museum system. Anybody at whatever level can be sustain themselves better now through what's happening in a democratization of value exchange and of what is valuable in society. There are people who come in at the beginning, who are the ones who kind of saw it first, the early adopters in the S curve, and then there's people who were like, oh my God, I got to get into that, who are the ones who. So if somebody's getting hustled, if you don't know who's getting hustled, it's probably you. It happens with the stock market all the time. Crypto in general is a game. It is, if you read through the, outside of the things that are validating, like for the mainstream buyers, like, Coinbase and Kraken and exchanges that are legit. Aside from those things, and people that are using it for, as a stock, as a commodity to buy and trade and to kind of as an investment vehicle. If that's you, if you're looking at it as an investment vehicle, understand that you need to understand the ecosystem of it. You need to understand what volatility means. You understand what your objectives and your goals are. My message was that it wasn't ultimately about the financial, even though it was really about what you now knew. So, because for me, I didn't see the blockchain space as like the hot news item of, oh my God, everybody's making a ton of money, even though, yes, tons of people have made tons of money. But my focus during that time was on providing value, comfort, love to those people that were in that experience, because I had been through it before when I was younger, and I knew how disappointing it is to have a lot of money and not to have a purpose, and to be, powerful, but not to feel it, right? So I dedicated myself just to spending time with them, starting a Burning Man camp, with with Jesse, whose Burning Man name is Medici. Think about it, and his heart is about helping creative people thrive, musicians and artists, and the artisans of the future. What we want to do is create better culture, right? And create and help artists succeed. That's why his new company, Six. That's why the system, what I'm doing, is so powerful. Now, if you're looking for the crypto space as a way to get rich, for me as a creator, it's about creating a community that really thrives. We're kings, man. We just come from different places. Don't do it to get rich.
Money, give me some. Money, out of time. Money, give me some. Money, give me some.
So that's number one. Understand the mechanics of it. Understand what you're doing. Understand the cultural implications. Understand that it's a tool, just like money is, like dollars are. Understand that it needs, the validation of culture and society. Understand that the people that are playing the game through information. just like Wall Street brokers and hedge funds are doing it. They're trading data, right? And they're making bets based on that. Because all those things are just agreements. You really should understand how the dynamics of, an economic exchange vehicle like that work. Number two, context is everything. If you're an artist and you think you're going to get rich using NFTs, yes, and make sure you understand that you still have to do the hard work of creating cultural relevance. You still have to be well known. You still have to be legitimate is the wrong word, because legitimacy now is subjective. You have to be true. You have to have integrity in your intent. I'm going to do an NFT because it doesn't matter what it is. Apparently you can do whatever. It's not yes, there's people who are going to do that, but most of those people are usually wiped out of the system within the first X amount of years, right? Those are people who are playing the long game in general, and you have to play with full faith that it's going to work, right? Because people they always play like that timid, like, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm the kind of person that if the cult looks like it's really happening, I'm joining full on and I'm believing. But when I joined the crypto cult, 4 years ago, it wasn't with the skepticism and the cynicism of somebody who wanted to make a quick buck. It was with the belief that this is going to change the world. And then I've been working towards that myself by creating my community, the old-fashioned way, by hand, getting people excited, teaching every Friday. We do Wednesdays and Fridays. The system is live with my brother Keone Chong, who's half Chinese, half Jamaican. I'm half Puerto Rican, half Dominican. All of us are like some weird pirates from different portals. But we can relate at that level, and we can say, hey, we're starting, an experience for creative people, and call it a church, call it whatever you want, but it's for us to understand how powerful we are, and for us to learn the tools that we need to thrive as creative people. Okay, now I have that community. Now add crypto to it. This is not Bloomberg, it's not, you have to create legitimate love and culture around the ideas. What Bloomberg and what the press for a stock does is years later at an IPO, after the company had gone through a phase of legitimately culturally embracing some values, sharing them, and people saying yes, now you become Airbnb. But it took years to become Airbnb for Airbnb to go public. For you to do the reverse, which is an ICO at the beginning, without the culture, of course, you're going to get really crappy results potentially, or scams, or people are going to, even if you had a legitimate intention and it wasn't a scam, it was difficult to prove that because you didn't have the runway that a traditional company had before they went public. So what I'm trying to say is context matters. Creating the foundation, the soil for your ideas, for your art inside a crypto space still matters. You still have to do that work. And if you've been doing it for a long time, how do you highlight it? How do you get your story straight? How do you get on enough podcasts that people say, oh, that's interesting? And that usually happens because you're authentic about what you're doing. It's not about getting on the phone, hey, can I be on your podcast? People just start calling you because they heard you on somebody else's. And they're like, hey, I like your art. I like what you're doing. Tell us about your NFT. You still have to be real. So keep it real, understand context. Be clear on your intentions. Is this for you to get rich quick, or are you in it, for real reasons, right? The second is context matters, the fertile soil around it. It's an ecosystem. It's like permaculture. You have to understand how permaculture works. You have to understand how the economy of influence and creativity works. And I think the third one is one that I think most people really forget about. Education and learning and community is great. Educating yourself about what crypto is, about what blockchain is, about what Bitcoin is, Ethereum, etc. That matters. But what really matters is the relationships that you form and the trust that exists inside those relationships.
Lowkey Giant.